I couldn't successfully drink alcohol. And I almost felt, I mean, it seems ridiculous saying this now, a failure because I couldn't drink until I discovered cocaine. I remember at one stage I'd spent 2 years on opiates in my flat, isolated from everyone. Mine was a very staggered road. I was so broken. There was a decision to make, and the decision to make was I going to kill myself, or was I going to go into a treatment center for the last time and try this recovery thing? I think I went to 25 treatment centers.
Let's talk about the problems the teens come with.
I think the biggest shift is technology. There is a very unregulated world online that everyone has access to.
Tell me more about Lyons campus.
What we're very good at is the reintegration part. How are we going to get you thriving in life?
Yes.
You know, it's a gift, whatever we given, right? I wouldn't live this joyful life today, you know, without having gone through what I went through.
Welcome to the Living a Life in Balance podcast. My name is Abdullah Boulad. I'm the founder and CEO of the Balance Rehab Clinic. My guest today is Johnny Graaff, addiction and mental health advocate and co-founder of Lyons Campus, a therapeutic education and recovery program for young adults. In this episode, Johnny shares his recovery story, from cycling through 25 different treatment centers and battling addiction and mental health to finding sobriety through discipline, service, and the 12 steps. We explore how those experiences became the foundation for his life's work, why he is passionate about supporting teenagers and young adults, and how Lyons Campus is tackling some of the most urgent issues they face today, from online bullying to ketamine addiction and self-harm. Johnny also shares his vision for the future of mental health care and why the system needs to evolve to truly meet young people where they are. I hope you will enjoy. Johnny, what motivated you to do what you do today?
I think that, you know, my story and my journey is one of, I don't think I set out ever to go into the healthcare behavioral health business. You know, I think it was through my own experiences and struggling with my own mental health from quite a young age and spending quite a substantial period of my sort of early life in institutions, you know. So I have spent a considerable amount of time in psychiatric hospitals and treatment centers, you know, because I'd been sort of battling my own addiction, mental health challenges from quite a young age. And I think that what sort of happened in my mid-30s, I was really struggling to find, I was working in advertising and I really loved it, but there was an opportunity for me to start something myself. And at that time, Cape Town in South Africa had become a sort of big destination for recovery. So what I did was I set up a treatment center in Cape Town and had a lot of amazing people around me, older people around me, psychiatrists, therapists, who sort of really showed me how to set something up. And that was the beginning of my journey, which was about 15 years ago. And I think that it's a sort of natural passion of mine. I also have a sister who has severe mental health issues, and I spent a lot of my life helping my parents try find solutions for her problems. And I spent a lot of time going to appointments and, you know, just trying to find a living solution for her to have a quality of life, which she probably wouldn't have been able to have without that support.
Okay. How old were you when you discovered first you're struggling?
I think there was always neurodiversity. You know, if I look back now at what we know, it's very easy for me to label myself.
Yes.
But back then, there were no buzzwords around. There was no word. People weren't even using words like neurodiversity. There was, you know, there was some dyslexia, there was some ADHD, but it was sort of very, you know, there just wasn't a much of an emphasis. You either fitted into the education system or you didn't. And I didn't. And I think what happens when you don't fit in is you rebel. And when you rebel, that involves obviously picking up some negative negative traits, right? And negative habits. And I think that's what happened to me.
Yes.
What I understand today is that a lot of young people with neurodiversity self-soothe.
Mhm.
They self-soothe by some sort of but with using either a substance or a behavior.
And you needed a substance or behavior. What about people? Were people around you which were helping in that moment?
I think I had very healthy friendships,
Mhm.
and I was a very social person. But I think that I really struggled with some of the academics,
Mhm.
and that at a sort of in your mid-teens has such a hugely negative impact on your self-esteem.
Yes.
So you might be able to mask quite well, but inside it's quite agonizing.
What's your understanding today of being neurodivergent?
Look, I think that it's such a broad spectrum,
Yes.
so it's very, there's certain traits on the autistic spectrum that
Mhm.
can really differ from end to end, right? I
Mhm.
think for me, it was my ability to process and
Mhm.
my ability to digest. Um, there's also, and you would probably know more about this than I would, but there is an argument to say, is someone neurodiverse or is someone just traumatized?
Mhm.
And sort of trying to differentiate between the two.
Yes.
But being that as it may, in my day, there wasn't the sort of assessments and medication protocols that there is today. I
Mhm.
think with a lot of the clients that I see today in our service is maybe a lot more severe in
Mhm.
that they are isolated, they're not engaging with education, they're not really functioning in
Mhm.
as a part of the sort of normal world.
Yes. It's like processing information, like something key, which is a common factor.
That could be one. It could also be the interpretation of information
Yes.
and what messages you're receiving
Mm.
and how you interpret those messages.
Mhm.
I think that can be one thing. I think also social cues
Mhm.
and social norms might not, you might not have understood or developed them to such a degree that you can look after yourself.
Mhm.
I think, for example, just using a case that we were managing recently is a young girl
Mm.
who had no idea of the boundaries she had to put around herself in order to sort of protect herself from exploitation,
Mhm.
and got herself into a position where she was shamed by the people at the school and then severely bullied, and then that re-traumatizes you, and then you're not engaged, you can't fit into that school, you've sort of been ostracized. And a lot of that started by just
Mhm.
having very different processing ability to someone else.
Yes. Were your parents aware of that situation?
I think they were incredibly overprotective.
Mm.
And I think that, one of the things that I learned later in life, because obviously my sort of my mental health struggles morphed into addiction, right? And I think what I've certainly learned from my own experience was that I was enabled a lot.
Mhm.
There was maybe not a clear enough bottom line that, like, look, this behavior is not okay. If you behave this way, we're going to
Mhm.
detach with love, right?
Mhm.
um I think they overcompensated, maybe felt guilty that,
Mm.
for some reason that they were to blame, you
Mhm.
know um which obviously, I know is not the case at all, but
Yes.
I can imagine how they felt.
Did they try to get help in
Absolutely.
the
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
I think I went to 25 treatment centers,
Oh.
you know. So,
Later with the addiction or
yes, for
before
the addiction.
for the
Yeah.
addiction? How did you get into the addiction? What was like the first steps which led to it, and how did it make you feel?
I think that, in your teens, late teens, it's a struggle to fit in. You're
Mm.
struggling, you're trying to find your place, right?
Mhm.
And it's a battle about, it's almost like a survival, right? And mine was a pretty silly story in that I couldn't successfully drink alcohol,
Mm,
so I hated the taste of alcohol. When I drank, I passed out.
mm,
And I almost felt, I mean, it seems ridiculous saying this now, a failure because I couldn't drink
mm,
until I discovered cocaine. And then when I discovered cocaine, I suddenly found, wow, I could drink,
mhm.
and I could, sort of socialize like everyone else. And that was the beginning,
I see.
of the sort of, this road into active addiction,
Mm,
which, as we know, can be any substance. Doesn't necessarily have to be cocaine. It can be
right.
pills, and I've gone through all of them. Right? It can
Yeah.
be opiates. It could be anything, and I've experienced every phase of addiction,
Mm,
almost fueled by trying to stop one thing
mhm.
would swap to another. So if you can imagine, right, a lot of people you see might have quit drinking or doing cocaine, but they've started taking benzos, or
Exactly.
they started taking opiates, or so it just sort of morphs from one thing to another. In the end, the sort of final days of my addiction, I wasn't using any, I wasn't drinking or using drugs. I was just taking pills,
Yeah.
prescription pills. That was my sort of final
Final stage.
innings.
Why were you switching or trying other drugs out or prescription medication? Why didn't you just stop with alcohol and cocaine, for example?
What I know now, and
Mm,
what I know now works for me is complete abstinence and in engagement with the 12-step program, right? That
mhm,
works for me. I'm not saying that works for everyone, but
mm,
it's certainly the program that works for me, because it gives me a certain amount of it requires a lot of discipline, dedication, commitment.
yeah.
And it also gives you elements of your life that you thought you'd be missing by abstaining, which is socialization
Mhm,
and engagement with other people and service to other people. So a key part of the program is to help the newcomer, right? So you never reach the end of that program. So I think that has given me a completely new sort of lease of life. But what I would say about cross addiction is that you might get to the point with alcohol and drugs where you go, this is very destructive. I'm getting into car accidents. I'm getting divorced, or I'm, I've been isolated from everyone. Maybe I should just try taking pills and stay at home and isolate.
mhm.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of like it morphs into something else. I remember at one stage I'd spent 2 years on opiates in my flat, isolated from everyone,
Mhm.
as just going from one extreme to another,
Yes, yes. How long was this period till you get into treatment? Was there?
I think that mine was a very staggered road,
Mm,
in that I would go into treatment, usually enjoy it,
mhm.
because it sort of gave me a huge relief.
Yes.
I would then get a bit of recovery afterwards, but then slip back in.
Mm,
And I think that um, also what happened is that I I hadn't reached a point where I'd had enough. You know,
mhm,
um, the last sort of the last drink or drug that I had 7 years ago was,
mhm,
I was so broken
mhm,
from that I remember the day that I decided that I was going to get better, and I remember it very clearly because there was a decision to make, and the decision to make was I going to kill myself,
mhm,
or was I going to go into a treatment center for the last time and try this
mhm,
recovery thing? And I think that was the greatest gift I ever had, because I went in there determined, you know.
mhm.
And fortunately, I had a great team of people looking after me. I was just lucky, I had a firm but loving group of people. So, I think that you would know more about this, but we can enable ourselves, right? We can enable people to
Yes.
continue with their bullshit, right?
Mhm,
Or we can gently but firmly shift,
mhm,
and I think it takes a lot of skill to know when to push and when not to push too hard,
mhm.
and just reach that sort of equilibrium where you're doing just enough to motivate that person to change.
Yes. No, absolutely. How many times did you go into residential treatment?
Gosh, I think more than 20 times.
Wow.
America and United Kingdom, South Africa. I think I clocked up a whole year at the Priory,
Yes.
in total.
Yeah.
If you had to spread it, if you had to cram it into 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that was psychosis, pill addiction, getting off pills, getting off benzos takes a long time, like 12 weeks to detox off benzos. And then you come out, you haven't detoxed enough, and then you slip back into it. And then
Yes.
it's another year, and then you're back in. It's like a revolving door, right?
Was it necessary in your case now to go to all these places to build up and be ready then for the final decision to be abstinent in your case? Or was it the last treatment which was so important by itself that it helped?
Yeah, I think that, in hindsight, I think for an approach that you can't rewrite history, right? But I think in hindsight, an approach that might have worked would have really been a more tough love approach, which was like, your options are very limited now. But for me, there was always options on the table.
Mm.
There was always an option on the table. There was always an option to return to treatment. There was always an option. I think when those options dried up is when I thought, okay, this is my last chance, and
Mm.
I'm feeling like I'm in hell.
Mm.
Let me get this right.
So you needed some sort of pressure or a limitation to your options.
I think so.
Mm. Okay. Do you think everyone would need or profit of some sort of pressure or more gentle invitation to treatment?
I think there's an argument to say that you have to smash yourself to bits
Yeah.
and then look for help.
Yeah.
I think what I used to use treatment for was a get out of jail card. I got myself into so much trouble that let me just disappear for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll disappear for a while, and then I'll come back.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a firm enough commitment.
Mm-hmm. So beside the addiction, what was the mental health conditions which have accompanied you during this time?
Well, I think the neurodiversity. I was diagnosed with some bipolar.
Yeah.
Hard to say sometimes. Is one result of the other? Are these issues? I mean, I certainly know my psychosis was a result of drug abuse, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I look back at my early life, there was a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of,
Mm.
there was just a lot of issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, so I sort of ended up in a lot of psychiatric units as well as addiction units,
Okay. Yeah.
But I mean, the positive
Mm-hmm.
from all of that is that I learned,
Mm-hmm.
the business that I'm in today, right? Because I've been through so many programs,
Obviously.
and I met so many case managers and
Mm-hmm.
key workers and therapists and psychiatrists that I know what worked for me and what appealed to me
Mm-hmm.
in someone.
Mm. You visited rehabs, addiction-focused centers. Were they addressing also the mental health issue, or was the focus mainly on detox and getting off the drugs and alcohol?
I think that most programs are okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're okay. They tick the boxes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that the issue I have with addiction treatment is that usually in America, it's quite common to have a detox before you enter treatment,
Yes.
whereas a lot of the norm here seems to be you enter, you detox, and you're in a program.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you digest what's in the program if you're detoxing for 4 weeks and then the program's over?
Mm-hmm.
It just will never work.
Yes.
I think also if you're going through even a 28-day program in America, and if you're doing a detox at the same time, you're not
Mm-hmm.
you're not really digesting what's in the program.
But you needed both the psychiatric support as well as the addiction support to get over.
Yes.
So that this was 7 years ago, the
Yeah,
last.
the last,
last.
yeah.
What have you done since then, or what was the next step in your life? What
Yeah.
was your passion
So,
to
so,
move
so
on?
in all this time and sort of chaos, there were wins, right? And it was setting up Montrose in Cape Town, the addiction treatment center, which is now an eating disorder clinic.
Mm-hmm.
I then came to the UK. I was involved with Start to Stop and setting that up with Cosmo. And once I had sort of exited the industry for a while, and I was involved in some other things, I was always thinking in the back of my mind, I'd love to go back into what I was doing. I really love what I was doing, but I need to give myself some more time to get well. And I think the biggest the big thing that everyone was talking about was young people and the lack of provision, particularly in private healthcare for young people. And that was where the sort of whole idea of Lyons Campus came about. And that's what I do now. We run a teen and young adult focused treatment center in London.
So this sounded now so quick. Yeah, you
Yes.
finished treatment and then you started
No,
a
no,
rehab
no, no,
center in
no, no.
Montrose.
No, it wasn't quick. There was a lot of I went into treatment. I spent quite a few years, working on my recovery,
Yes.
and then there was a sort of slow re-entry
Yeah.
into setting up a treatment center.
What motivated you to do that?
I think that what appealed to me was I think that I love a challenge. And everyone said to me, no one wants to do this. It's a nightmare. No one wants to work with this age group.
Yeah.
And, so the more people that said that to me, the more I wanted to do it, because I thought, well, it's not making sense what you're saying. People used to say to me, oh, they smash up the place and they're impossible to work with. And that hasn't been my experience at all. I think in 4 years of operating, we've only had to discharge one client for trying to set a tree alight. But we've never seen anything like that. And we have also had the most incredible outcomes. So, but I think that this time, what was different about it was that I had two partners who ran a school, so they knew this space quite well. And as you know, London's got some amazing practitioners and psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists that, again, were very generous with their time and advice. And how does this look?
Yeah.
What do we need, and where can people thrive?
I also wonder if the effect of genetic and versus epigenetic. What do you think in your case? Has there been any genetically, historically, within your family issues already affecting you as well, or what was it in your case?
I think that if I look at my family history, there was a lot of high achievement. I had an incredibly clever great grandfather who built a incredible business in Africa, at a very young age, and then a father and grandfather who were sort of very successful in business and politics. So I think in order to have these traits where you succeed, you have to have fallibility, right? And I think one of the fallibilities is addiction, because addiction can be workaholism,
Yes.
and it can be autism, in your sort of your intelligence, right? We know that. We know that a lot of very intelligent people are not neurotypical. So there must have been traits, definitely addiction traits. And I think that, the way I see it now is very different to how I would have answered that question 10 years ago. Today I go, it's a gift, whatever we're given, right? It's because I wouldn't live this joyful life today, without having gone through what I went through.
Yes.
And we see it a lot with our clients, as I'm sure you know as well, is that we see a lot of these traits in the parent. It's so evident where this has come from.
Yeah, so it can be the environment, but also it can be the historical genetic part
Absolutely.
as well. So I understand you're passionate about the young ones, the kids. What particularly do you feel yourself dragged to serve that client group?
I think for me, what feels quite personal
Mm,
is that it was around the age of 15, 16
mhm.
that I found things quite challenging in my own life, right?
Yeah.
So I have a certain empathy
Mm,
towards those young people. We deal with from as young as 14 to as old as 25, and they say that is actually your brain is developing
mhm.
until you're 25. I didn't know that. It actually
Yes.
so we deal with a very interesting phase.
Mm,
What I also explain to people is that what we're dealing with is someone with a very irrational way
mhm.
of thinking, purely because of their age, right?
Yes.
Coupled with a mental health issue,
Mhm.
coupled with maybe some sort of compulsive disorder,
Mm,
cutting,
mm,
eating, drugs, gaming,
mhm.
whatever it may be. So it's so multifaceted, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's what makes it interesting. What I also really enjoy is doing something no one else is doing, really.
Mm.
There are not that many people in Europe doing young people and specializing in young people. And that's what we do, you know.
Why is there a lack of programs and services for young people?
I think what a lot of people don't understand, right, when they compare us to America,
Mhm.
is that Europe is social welfare.
Mm,
And even incredibly wealthy people in Europe still believe that healthcare should be free.
mhm.
So there's this expectation that the state will take care of this.
Yes.
I think what's happened, certainly I can speak for the UK, is that a lot of the very good state institutions have been eroded away by
Mm,
cuts of budgets. I actually just heard last week that one of the best adolescent units in London run by the NHS is shut down,
mm,
purely because of budget. And you've got this group of people that love working with young people, don't have
mhm.
jobs anymore.
Yeah.
What a waste. And what will happen is you then have private services setting up exactly what the public service was
Mm,
doing, and
mhm.
then the public service buying from the private service at double the
Services.
price. It makes no sense.
Mm,
They're shutting down all the inpatient eating disorder. They're not contracting inpatient ED beds anymore in the UK. It's gonna be community focused.
yes.
If you ask any psychiatrist about that right now, there's going to be a disaster. So
Mhm.
what will happen is private eating disorder clinics will be then paid by the NHS, which will
Mhm.
cost them double to look after all these people. So eroding your own services to so I think that's a long-winded answer to your question, but I think
Mm,
that there is an expectation that the state is going to take care of it,
mhm.
and that's probably why.
Mhm.
I think what I have met are some of the most talented people working in the NHS and local authority services, really passionate social workers,
Mm,
psychiatrists, psychologists that I've been so incredibly impressed by, because often purely because someone, if you're 15 or 16
mhm.
and you reported to social services, it doesn't matter, sort of what income level you are, you're still
Mhm.
under their radar. So
Yeah.
we do have a lot of cross pollination with local services.
Okay. That sounds strange to me because if we look at statistics and what's happening in the world, mental health problems, issues, including suicidal rates, are increasing rapidly. In the last 10 years, numbers were 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 extremely high.
Mm.
So why to shut down then facilities when the demand is increasing? Is it because of the budgets are in different fields, different areas?
There is a lot that I could um, dissect in the NHS and what is wrong, right?
Mm,
And you're talking about really about mismanagement
mm,
and mismanagement and too much management, and clinicians aren't able to do what they're good at because the services have become so bloated. I also
mhm,
think demand, cost,
mhm,
um, there are just so many factors that
mhm.
that drain the resources of the services,
Yeah.
right? I mean, apparently, it costs every single United Kingdom taxpayer £500 a month to run the NHS.
Mm.
And if you look at private health insurance, it would cost you £300 a month
Yes.
to subscribe to a private health insurer.
Yes.
It doesn't add up, right?
No.
So whoever you are in the UK, no matter what category you're in, you're paying £500 a month towards the NHS in taxes.
Are there initiatives or plans to change that?
I think what we're trying to do
Yeah.
is broaden our service offering so that it can be more inclusive of local authority NHS clients, because we do see, and we have had recently clients that have been funded from local authorities in the UK coming to us. And I think what will happen is private healthcare will play more of a role in solving these problems.
Yes.
I think what you've got at the moment is a lot of profiteering. So you just have people charging whatever they want because they know there's demand. So people in the private sector charging whatever they want to the NHS for services. I think that'll end. I think there'll be a ceiling, but I think that the private healthcare world definitely has a big role to play in the solutions.
Yes. Let's talk about the problems the teens come with. What are the issues, problems they struggle today at schools, at universities, wherever they come from, and what do they get treated for?
I think the biggest shift since, I would say, around 2005 is technology, right? So there is a very unregulated world online that everyone has access to, okay? And there's no limitations to the access. So their world is very fast, and their access to whatever it is very immediate. So I think that's the one thing I'll add, right? We can talk about the changes in how people are growing up, and less free play and less more overprotective parents, and you know the book by Jonathan Haidt, the Anxious Generation.
Yes.
So that sort of theme. So that's a sort of good place to start, because we're dealing a lot with that, right? Coupled with that, and I've learned this a lot through running Lyons campus, is that everything now doesn't take place at the park. It takes place on Snapchat, on TikTok. So the dealer is there. The friends are there. They've got friend groups of like thousands on Snapchat. The bullying is different. It's shaming, it's immediate. 1995, you're being bullied at school, you could go home for some relief, right? Today, there's no relief.
Yeah.
They're all online, they're all comparing, talking, et cetera, et cetera. So that's, one of the things that we've got to understand better. They all know where each other are. It's just a very different ecosystem. I think what we see a lot of at the moment is particularly ketamine, ketamine abuse, addiction
with
young people, very young. Ketamine is cheaper than alcohol. So it and that's how accessible it is, and it's mega destructive to your body, right? So it will destroy your bladder. Literally, if, from ketamine abuse, your bladder will never recover, right? So we see a lot of that. The good thing with ketamine is it's an easy detox. So that's the one aspect of it that is quite straightforward. The key then is showing them that there's a way of remaining abstinent and that there's a different life, out there for them. So I think that's one area that's bubbling. A couple of months ago, we used to see a lot of self-harm, a lot of self-harm. It sort of, that has sort of morphed now into ketamine. Before that, it was a lot of eating disorders. So every time we have a wave of issues, I said to my business partners once, I said, we're just going to become an eating disorder clinic. I said, this is going to be and then suddenly there were no more eating disorders. Everyone was self-harming, and the completely different wave came in. Now it's ketamine, so you have these sort of different waves of disorders, but the root is all the same, right?
Is it the same, or are there nuances
Well, I
to
said
each?
I think the root is that there's a lot of neurodiversity coupled with poor mental health, coupled with self-medicating with a behavior or a chemical.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
I mean, so and in my view, that it
Mm.
all comes from the same place. You know, um, I think that what we've managed to do, and I know I'm not going to plug Lyons Campus in this podcast, but I think the ethos, and you would know this from
Mm.
from running the balance. It's about the people you hire
Mm-hmm.
and the role models they have around them,
Right.
and the ability to see beyond.
Mm-hmm.
You're not in some gloomy psychiatric hospital in South London
Mm.
and you've got nurses running around you. It's kind of like we've got young, fresh,
Yes.
young staff, some of them in recovery. We've got some much more sort of old experienced staff,
Mm-hmm.
and and it's all about the stability around them and the reliability in the program. And,
Mm-hmm.
I think all these very basic elements that we tend to overlook are the most important.
Yeah, providing a space where they can
Yes,
connect to and be part of a community where they can be accepted as they are, and not always on the edge of being afraid.
exactly.
What can someone think about me, do to me? And
Exactly.
and I'm with you absolutely. I have also young children, and I see how social media and always to be connected. My my daughter tells me sometimes, I have to refill my social batteries. So because
Yes.
they are, and she does this or
Yes.
tries to do this consciously,
Yes.
but possibly this is very rare. She's
Yeah.
16
Yes.
right now. With others, I would say it's difficult to disconnect, and that's the biggest problem. We as adults even have this struggle. When we walk home, we have still our work, our office with us. It's on our phone, it's our
Exactly.
computer. We are always
Mm.
online. So the children cannot
Mm.
shut down, they
No.
cannot disconnect. And another aspect is that um, chil- on social media and online network, um, it doesn't forget. It
Yes.
doesn't forget. Maybe in the early days, back 20 years ago, you were playing in the playground. Something was bad, you were bullied, but maybe the next day it was forgotten
Yes.
again, and that's not the case when when we are dealing online, social media.
They're hyper connected.
Yeah.
I think also what I've noticed is, and through my daughter, who's 8,
Mm.
is that I'm very conscious of how often I'm on my phone because that's role modeling, right? I mean, they pick up what you're doing, they're going to do what you're doing. So you're
Yes.
on your phone all the time, they're going to mirror that, right?
Hmm.
But what I've noticed is that it's also the immediacy of everything
Hmm.
because they see something online and then you've got Temu, which kind of, you can buy the whole of Temu for like £2
Yes.
and have everything shipped to you tomorrow, and it's like everything is immediate, right?
Yes, it's a very good point. I mean, shopping addiction at a young
Yes,
age. And it's just social media has become a sales tool for so many organizations because they throw ideas, and now, even in September, trying to sell an advent calendar for December, um, ab- about cosmetics to young children. So, I
exactly.
mean, what's the point?
Exactly.
What's the point of that? And my daughter just came recently to me and presented to me, yeah, this is this advent calendar. It's limited and we have to
Yes.
buy it now. I said, what is in it? Yeah,
Yeah.
but you have this. But do you need them? Do you need these
Yes.
creams on your face?
No.
She's 13, you know? So I just tried to have a
But I
conversation and
was
rethink.
listening in the car to a guy that runs a program in America, and he said the social media companies use the same playbook from alcohol and tobacco companies
Hmm.
when they're developing these apps and the user interface between these apps.
Yes.
I mean, that's frightening. Joe Camel, the Alka Pops, these are all, the digital space has drawn all the tricks
Yes.
to draw you in from there.
Yes. I think being a role model is important as parents already to be there and have an open conversation about it.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it needs much more work. What do you think do young adults and children miss today?
There seems to be a lot more fear around, right, than there was a couple of years ago. I think freedom, a certain amount of freedom, the ability to make mistakes and pick yourself up, I think micro helicopter parenting, we understand that, right? But we don't really put it into practice because we're sort of hyper vigilant, I try and make a very conscious effort to give my children a lot of freedom. I would rather my daughter was on her iPad next to me and comfortable and showing me stuff than hidden away in a bedroom talking to some people I didn't know. I think I make a very big effort for her to have as many play dates as possible every week. And I make a real effort to reach out to neighbors and friends that I know to make plans, because I think that, especially if you're living in a city, you can, you sort of, it's easy to just isolate and retreat and
Yes. But what you're saying is basically keep busy
and socialization, sports,
connect.
socialization, connect, healthy connections, clubs.
Yes.
I think 80% of the youth clubs in the UK have shut down. I mean, there's just so many things that bonded communities that are no longer there.
Yes.
And we need more. We need more spaces for people to connect.
Like these local youth clubs.
Yes.
Why they have been reduced?
I think it was budgets.
I remember back in Switzerland when I was young, this was like locally also organized by the churches, and it was like a social initiative. And it was quite good to connect with people outside, but there were no other ways. There were the sport clubs. You can be part of a sport club or then join a club like that. So, okay. So back to budgets.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again. Tell me more about Lyons campus. How do you work there? How do you help these young adults? And what's your ethos around that?
What we set out to do, right, was really be an extended care for clients that had been inpatient somewhere else. So when we opened, we would accept clients from other clinics all over the world, because we were really focused on reintegration. I think that a lot of people go to treatment and they have a great treatment experience. But what about afterwards, right? How do you put all this amazing stuff into practice? And so I think that that's always been my passion. And so that was the core. But what we sort of evolved over the last 4 years is we started taking in clients that weren't appropriate to be in an inpatient unit. It would be too traumatic for them, or didn't have the resources. And we would do a favor for a psychiatrist and say, look, he'll say, can you take this client in? And we'll make a plan. And I think we've evolved as a service.
And how does a program look like?
So the program runs Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, one process group every day, some psychoeducation, sport every day, some experiential therapy. Very straightforward, right? What I think makes it very unique is the team we have around them and cultivating an incredible staff cohort. We have great people working for us, great role models, been with us for a long time. We don't use any agency staff. The clients are very familiar with the team, and some clients stay with us for almost a year. So it becomes their home. And I think that if you have enough passion, if I don't have to meet the whole team of a treatment center, I just have to meet the owner. That's all I need to meet, because I get a very good sense when I meet the owner what everything else is going to be like, and what the culture is like, and
Yeah.
what the care is going to be like. It always works like that. And I think that, myself and my business partners, Ollie and Rupert, we all love what we do, right? We love what we do, and we love the client group that we work with, and that shows.
It has to come with compassion and from your own passion as well
Absolutely.
in what you do. That's what I believe. Otherwise, you cannot provide proper service.
Absolutely.
So they live there.
They live with us, and then what we're able to do is we're able to match them with a specialist. So, for example, if we've got a client with young person, neurodiverse with ARFID, we can match them with the sort of leading specialist in London who specializes in that. If we have a sort of a young boy, slightly antisocial, we can match him with a great psychiatrist, a football coach. Another client recently we matched her with a very good trauma program on Harley Street. So what we would do is sort of chaperone them around. We would do the basics, but we chaperone them around to a suitable clinician. With the client we shared, it's very much, she came to the balance for some of the more intricate work that needed to be done before she was ready to go to the next stage, right? The assessment, some of the trauma work, all of the sort of more deep, what I call more sophisticated processes. But what we're very good at is the reintegration part. How are we going to get you thriving in life?
Yes. Yes, and this has been missing for quite some time. I would wish every client would do a reintegration program,
I
not
know.
just the young ones,
Exactly.
but often
Everyone.
often it depends of course their time, and they have to go back to home and
Exactly. Where they're
business,
from,
families, and depends where they're from. If the young adults, they have
Yes.
most likely more time, and if they are still at school.
I think what we're lucky with at the moment, we have 2 from Singapore, we have 1 from Germany, we have 1 from America.
Yes.
We've got, so what's great about that is that they're all from different parts of the world, but they can live in London. I think, you've probably got, the same situation where people are coming to you from all over the world, and then they're going back to Singapore, Hong Kong, or Beijing, or
Yes.
Riyadh, or wherever. But it would be amazing if they were coming from the same place, and you could have like a hub for them to return to.
Yeah. Usually I prefer, and this is how we, let's say, set up in Mallorca and other locations, to be more in nature and for a primary treatment setting.
It's lovely.
Go deeper, disconnect, recalibrate, and put on a certain track. But I like also the idea for a reintegration to be more in an urban environment.
Exactly.
Also to deal with possible triggers, environment, practical things. Go shopping, go to the cinema, socialize, in the environment. Has this been also in your case or for your clients an important factor to be
I
in
agree.
a city?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, look, Yes We Can is in the countryside in the Netherlands. Some of the programs in America are Wilderness in the mountains, Visions in Malibu in the mountains. I think it's great for a period of time, but you can't stay in La La Land forever, right? And then you've got to come back to some sort of normalcy. And I think we're sort of in the hub of Marylebone, and it's a lovely area, but it's more the real world.
Yes. We get contacted also often by those, I have to still finish school. I have these exams, my IB exams, and how do you deal with these?
So we do education. So, our sister company is Lionheart Education, and they do all the education for the young people that are with us. So it's not mandatory, but if necessary, it's a very, very, it works very well because they can do the education while they're with us. The other beautiful thing is we can catch them up very quickly. So they might have fallen back with their education. We can really speed up the, getting through the A levels or into uni. whatever they need to do.
That's important.
Yeah, very, because that's your goal, right? And
Yeah.
they've got to have goals to work towards.
Mm. Do you have some limitations about type of clients you don't take?
Yeah, I mean, as we were talking about earlier, I think BMI under 17 or 18 is very, very challenging. You know, we're not a refeeding clinic.
Yeah.
We're definitely a great option for aftercare for ED and reintegration for ED. You know, we can do meal support, we can do a lot of the work that needs to be done, but definitely not that early stage.
Yes.
We also can't have anyone that is psychiatrically unwell, that needs stabilization. And critically, we can't have anyone with us that doesn't want to be with us. You know, it's an open
Yeah.
campus, right? So you can come and go as you please. We're not the place to go if you want to dump your kids somewhere. You know, it's not going to work. We also need a lot of family involvement. We need the families to be committed because it's with that age range, it's a very collaborative. It just requires a lot of collaboration.
Yeah. What type of advice do you give parents or families?
I think for families, I would say grab all the resources that's given to you that is offered to you. You know, often we find, for whatever reason, we find families can be quite non-committal with what they need to do. And I think it's so critical for them to become educated themselves and resourceful in sort of knowing how to navigate this, you know.
You also do sessions with families,
Yes,
the therapist
absolutely, yeah.
you could bring
Absolutely.
in if
I
needed.
mean, look, some programs, we're not one of them, but some programs are mandatory. They say if the family's not involved, you know, i.e. the family come for a week, you know, you can't come.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, we're not as sort of dogmatic in our approach. We're much, you know, we work around what's doable.
When you think about the market, because I know you've been innovative, also thinking about what's not available and what that's why you started Lyons
Yes.
Campus. What is missing? If you could now start something additional, what would you do?
One of the areas that I think is very interesting is supported living, but not necessarily in the private sector, in providing supported living for local authorities in the UK. I think that's a growing area. I also have this philosophy that there's an opportunity for anyone who's not greedy. I think that, you know, if you look at so many of the services and healthcare businesses in the UK are owned by American private equity. It's mega business, and it's just like, you know, open, and you know, you can't work like that in mental health. I don't think it you know, it doesn't match, because it's got to be passionate and there's got to be care. Where I think there's a huge opportunity is that you can come in, offer a good service, make a decent return, and really stand out. And I think that's where the opportunity is, whatever you choose to do. You know, I think there's opportunity in inpatient ED. I think there's opportunity in supported living, children's homes.
Yes.
You know, special needs education is a huge thing. I think addiction and alcohol, there's so many services, right?
Yes.
I mean, there're just so many beds available, and there's so many options for you to choose from. You know, lots of great options. You know, you can go to America, you can go to South Africa, you can go to any, you know, a couple in Europe. You know, it's just there's a lot available. So it doesn't interest me, you know, because I just think it's, how am I going to differentiate what I'm doing there?
Yeah.
You know,
Why is there no service available for, let's say, special needs and care?
well, I think that there are services, but they're of a very low quality. And I think the reason they're of a low quality is that they get bought up by corporations, and then they lose the personal touch.
Yes.
And I think, as you know, with your business, right, it's a very personal business.
Yeah.
You know, the brand is an extension of you, the people you have, you know, everything everything requires a lot of your personal investment, and that's what I think people get when they come to you. And but I think you can replicate that in other areas, but you can't have 100 100 branded homes and then expect everyone to be run,
Yes.
you know.
When you think about the industry as a whole, are we heading into the right direction, or would you wish something to happen in the market locally and globally?
I tell you, I tell you what I love is collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
I find it's been what's been very pleasurable is finding partners. It's a pleasure to work with you. It's a pleasure to work with some outpatient clinics
Yeah.
in London that I really believe in the work they do, that's quality, that have very decent people involved. And I think that's what's great, because we can't be brilliant at everything, right? So it's kind of like, I know where that could work for that person. I think also what we do a lot of, as I'm sure you do, is we are quite resourceful to inquiries, because not everyone can afford us. So, what we've done, for example, is put together guides for people without resources on how to get access to resources, because there are some resources available to them. They just don't know how to access them. And, so we've put together a guide on how to approach your local authority, your local NHS. How do I get the funding? Who do I speak to? And sort of help them with that process.
Good. That will help more and more
Yeah,
people
absolutely.
also to get information in the first place, and second,
Yeah.
get it physically as well.
And also, look, I mean, 10 years ago, you couldn't go to a clinic in Mallorca and work on a sort of micro issue that you were going through. It was your choices were really like a psychiatric hospital or a
Yes.
health farm.
Yeah.
There was there wasn't an option where I could go to a retreat
Yeah.
and actually have a top medical team around me, look at every aspect of myself, and get through that divorce, or get through that
Absolutely.
that
I
trauma, or whatever it is. That it
agree.
just didn't exist.
Agree. And the development of offers which are more individualized care
Yes.
oriented and more holistically,
Yes.
I think that's our ethos,
Mm.
is what has been now been more and more available in the market, and the offering has been creating also the demand,
Yes.
because as you said, in the past, people didn't know. I mean, the only option is just to go to the NHS, or just go to the next local hospital and get the necessary help, like mental health would be
Yes.
breaking a leg or so. But
Exactly.
that's not the case, because being in a hospital, in a setting, gray, small rooms, shady, it's
Wherever you are,
certainly
right?
wherever you
Wherever you
are,
are.
because I've seen, particularly with eating disorders, then they have to be fed, and some of inquiries we received, clients have stayed 6 to 12 months in a room in a hospital, and they were not able to move out of the
Yes.
room, or walk, and this is
Yeah.
traumatizing. I mean,
Exactly.
you have to stabilize
Yeah.
again that person first for a while before doing a proper work.
Mm.
So I think what I can say to parents is, be careful about the environment, and not just
Exactly.
think about the urgency of the service itself. Of course, if someone low blood pressure needs to go to hospital, stabilize for a couple of days, that's fine. But
Yes.
the environment is so key. The people who work there are so important. It has to have a compassionate approach to the healing process. What I'm wondering is to know what you do personally to stay in balance in your daily life.
I, as I mentioned earlier, I'm very religious about my 12-step program.
Yeah.
And then I am very religious about training. I have a trainer. I go to the gym 3 times a week.
Good.
I play tennis. I walk a lot. Daily, I usually walk home from work, 1 hour.
Nice.
I listen to my podcast. I'll listen to the Balance podcast
Great.
on my walk. Um, and then my family, you know, I have
Mhm.
2 young children. I have an older boy as well, that keep me very busy.
Yeah.
Um, I'm actually moving back to South Africa in a year.
Oh,
Yeah, so I want to also be in
with
nature.
with the family.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I think that that is something that I never
Mhm.
really considered
Mhm.
until about a year ago. And I thought, I don't want to spend, I just think I don't want my children growing up on the streets of London, right?
Mm.
I want them to be in nature and have
Yeah.
access to space. And
Yes.
like you've moved to Mallorca, I mean,
Exactly. Yes.
it's a lovely quality of life. And I think it slows down the aging.
Mhm.
You know, you can have a longer childhood
Mhm.
in if you're not in a city,
Yeah.
so I think that'll be another contributing factor to my well-being.
Very
But I
nice.
think when you're in a program, you're very conscious of your sleep, your caffeine intake, your diet,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, all the sort of basics.
Mhm. I will definitely go and visit you if I get
You'll
an
be more than
invitation.
welcome. Maybe we set up a balance in Cape Town.
Yes, probably. We have employees there, by the
Yeah,
way,
exactly.
so we can certainly connect and see where we can offer our
Yes.
services and help more people. If you can speak to everyone in the world right now, tell them one wisdom, one thing they can implement into their life, what would that be?
Everything's going to be okay.
Mhm.
That's an important thing to remember. And I think another important element is discipline.
Mm.
Just to give to I know it sounds quite harsh,
Mhm.
but if you focus on uh, you know s- whether that be meditation, whether that be conscious reading, whether that be walking, whether
Mhm.
that all these things take discipline. And
Mhm.
as you know, what it takes 10 days to form a habit, right?
Beautiful. Let's work on our routines.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here
Thank you
today
for
with
having me.
us. Was a real pleasure.
Yes, pleasure.
I know time is precious, and
No,
but
lovely to be here.
I enjoyed our
Yes.
discussion. Thank you.
I think